Hello, my friend. Today, I invite you to listen and read along. Don't just listen, read every word, repeat them, and feel the story. Step by step, you will learn English through this journey. Let the story guide you, sentence by sentence. Ready? Let's begin. A cold autumn night. The wind blew through the bare branches, carrying dampness and the smell of wet earth. In the vast mansion, Mr. Jonathan Hale, an aging banker, slowly walked inside. His heavy coat was covered with rain dust, and his shoes clicked against the wooden floor. His face was etched with deep wrinkles, his eyes weary. Yet within them still flickered something, a memory from long ago, 15 years earlier. Back then, Jonathan was young, wealthy, and powerful. He was notorious for his arrogance and self-satisfaction. That evening, beneath the dazzling light of a crystal chandelier, he hosted a lavish banquet. Red wine swirled in glasses. Cheerful voices filled the air, and the guests were all brilliant minds. Professors, doctors, lawyers, writers. In the haze of drink, they began to debate a sensitive subject, the death penalty. An elderly professor with silver hair spoke slowly. Executing a man is inhumane. Better to imprison him for life, to let him live in regret. Another guest nodded. Yes, life imprisonment is more merciful than instant death. Jonathan set down his glass, his voice booming. I disagree. A swift death is kinder. Life imprisonment torments a man every hour, every day. That is true cruelty. The room fell silent for a moment. Then a youthful voice rang out. It was Adrian Ward, a lawyer only 25 years old. He was slender, with a thin face, but eyes that burned bright. He smiled, yet his tone was firm. Both are evil, but if I must choose, I choose life imprisonment, for as long as one lives, there is hope. Death ends everything. Those words struck Jonathan's pride. He slammed his hand on the table, glasses rattling. Impossible! I'll wager you 2 million rubles that you cannot stay alone in a closed room for 5 years. The guests stirred. 2 million rubles was an enormous sum. Adrian did not flinch. He stood tall, his eyes ablaze. I will do it. Not 5 years, but 15 years. Jonathan threw back his head and laughed, his voice echoing. Agreed, I'll wager 2 million. Adrian answered firmly, and I wager with my freedom. The room froze. Faces turned in shock. A mad wager had been struck between an arrogant banker and a young lawyer full of pride. The very next day, a contract was signed. Adrian would live in a small house within Jonathan's garden, cut off entirely from the world. He was forbidden to speak to anyone, forbidden to step outside, forbidden to be free. But he was allowed books, wine, cigarettes, and music. Food, paper, and necessities would be passed through a small opening. If he left before the end, he would lose everything. If he endured to the final moment, Jonathan would pay him 2 million rubles. On the day Adrian stepped into the little house, grey clouds filled the sky. Jonathan stood outside, glass of wine in hand, lips curled. You'll quit in 3 or 4 years. But Adrian only nodded slightly, his gaze resolute. In the first year, loneliness engulfed him. He played the piano endlessly to chase away the silence. He drank no wine, smoked no cigarettes. He read love stories and adventures. In the long nights, he whispered to himself, I don't know why my heart feels so empty. I feel anxious, but I will not give up. I only wish tomorrow would come faster. By the second year, he changed. He cast aside light tales and turned to classics, philosophy, and poetry. He read Shakespeare, Homer, and Cervantes. He copied passages, repeated every line, as if carving them into his soul. By the 5th year, a shadow fell upon his spirit. Adrian drank heavily and lay in bed for days. The pages he wrote were torn to pieces. Many nights, muffled sobs echoed from the room. Jonathan heard them and sneered. He'll give up. Yet in the 6th year, Adrian rose again. He plunged into study. He devoured languages, philosophy, history, and science like a starving man. Books piled high in the room. Every day, he filled dozens of pages with notes. Jonathan watched from afar, shaking his head. Madness. What's the use of learning when you'll never live free? But Adrian did not stop. 10 years passed, and he had read more than 600 volumes. Then suddenly, he asked for only one book, the Bible. Jonathan was astonished, thinking he has studied so much, and now he needs only one book. But in the last 2 years, Adrian changed again. He read everything medicine, science, poetry, and religion. He seemed to race against time, trying to embrace the whole world within his memory. Meanwhile, Jonathan, each day looking toward that little house, grew more unsettled. A truth he had never considered was slowly taking shape. Tonight, 15 years later, inside the grand mansion, Jonathan stood still. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, and he knew by morning he must pay the price for that reckless wager. In the large house, Jonathan Hale sat in unease. The clock struck with each beat, marking the passing of the night. In only a few hours, the wager of 15 years would end, and he, the man who had once been wealthy and powerful, was now penniless because of failed business ventures and disastrous investments. Tomorrow, I will lose everything, he muttered. 2 million rubles. He will take away the very last coin. Fear gripped his aging heart. A terrifying thought flashed in Jonathan's mind. If Adrian were to die tonight, I would be free. He leapt to his feet, trembling as he opened the safe and took out a small key. The wind howled outside the window. The clock pointed to 3 in the morning. Jonathan put on his coat and silently stepped into the pitch-dark garden. The icy drizzle lashed against his face. He walked past the rows of trees, their leaves whispering in the night. The gardener was nowhere to be seen, likely hiding from the rain. Jonathan stopped in front of the small house. His heart pounded violently. Just one blow, just one moment. He pushed open the wooden door. Inside was pitch black, silent. Jonathan struck a match, its flickering light casting shadows across the damp walls. He stepped into the outer room, and it was empty. The inner room still bore its sealed lock. Jonathan bent down and peered through the small window. Adrian Ward sat motionless at the table. His face was gaunt, his hair and beard white, his thin shoulders trembling slightly under the yellow glow of a candle. In front of him lay a handwritten page. Jonathan frowned. Was he still alive? He held his breath and then saw Adrian's chest faintly rise and fall. He was sleeping, utterly exhausted. Jonathan's hands shook. If he only stepped inside and pressed tight, no one would ever know. The thought gnawed at him like a nightmare. But before acting, he snatched up the paper. The candlelight revealed Adrian's trembling handwriting. Tomorrow I will be free. I can step outside and see people again. But I do not want your money. I do not want your wealth, your pleasures, or the false wisdom that the world praises. For 15 years, I have lived inside books. I have seen love, triumph, suffering, glory, knowledge, and power, everything. And now I loathe them. I despise your happiness, your wisdom, your riches, and your beauty. They are all illusions. They will all vanish. Death will sweep them away. Therefore, I renounce the 2 million rubles. I will leave this house 5 hours before the wager ends. I give up. I choose the freedom of the soul, without the burden of money. Jonathan froze. His hand shook violently, and the page slipped from his grasp onto the table. He looked at Adrian, the frail man who seemed long dead from solitude, and felt his own heart grow heavy. I planned to kill him, and he has abandoned everything. He bent down and placed a trembling kiss upon Adrian's white hair. Then he quietly left, stepping back into the night. In the grand house, Jonathan sank onto his bed. He felt small, ashamed. He whispered, He is the truly wealthy one, and I am nothing but a pauper." Morning came. A servant rushed in, alarmed, "Sir, Mr. Adrian has left the room. We saw him climb through the window and go out the garden gate." Jonathan merely nodded, his voice hoarse. "Let him go." When they checked, the traces were fresh, the window wide open, footprints pressed into the wet ground. Adrian had truly departed, exactly as he had written 5 hours before the wager's end. Jonathan quietly locked the letter away in his safe. He wanted no one to know. He feared that if the truth spread, people would laugh at him, say he had lost, that he had been humbled by a young lawyer. Adrian vanished. No one ever saw him again. Inside Jonathan's heart remained only an immense emptiness, shame, fear, and awe at the strength of the human spirit. That autumn morning, the sky was grey and dim. Mist spread across the garden. Jonathan Hale sat motionless in his armchair, his hands trembling. He had been awake the entire night. Before his eyes, the memory of Adrian Ward's letter remained as vivid as if he had just read it. He muttered, "He lived 15 years in solitude, only to give it all up. He is richer than I am in spirit, and I am left only with shame." Inside Jonathan, a storm raged. He remembered the moment when he had intended to kill Adrian. That thought made him shudder. If not for that letter, perhaps his hands would have been stained with blood. Hurried footsteps echoed. "A servant reported, sir. We searched the entire garden. Mr. Adrian has gone. No one knows where he went." Jonathan closed his eyes. He whispered, "Leave it. Do not search any more. He has chosen freedom." In the days that followed, news of the wager spread throughout the town. People whispered and speculated, but no one knew the whole truth. Jonathan kept the letter locked inside a safe, sealed tight, as if he wished to imprison the truth along with it. But in his heart, he could not lock away the obsession. Every night, he dreamed of Adrian sitting beneath candlelight, his face hollow, but his eyes burning bright. Adrian looked straight at him and said, "Your money is meaningless. My knowledge is infinite. I walk away to prove that this world is nothing but a dream." Jonathan awoke in terror, drenched in sweat. He gasped for breath, feeling utterly impoverished. A month passed. Jonathan was no longer the powerful man he once had been. He avoided the gaze of his friends and declined invitations to grand parties. Within him, everything felt hollow. One afternoon, as he passed the small house where Adrian had once lived, he stopped. The house was silent, covered in dust. He opened the door and stepped inside. The wooden table was still there, a few scraps of paper scattered on the floor. Jonathan sat down and placed his hand on the table. Images of those 15 years returned the sound of piano notes, of laughter, of tears, of books piled high. Now all of it was only a memory. He whispered, "Adrian, you have won. Not I, not money, but you, day by day." Jonathan came to realize one thing: what pained him was not the loss of money, But the loss of the truth that a young man had proven the world holds values far greater than silver or gold. He began to change. From an arrogant man, he became quiet and humble. He spoke little, often lost in thought. People saw him walking more often in the garden, his eyes gazing far away, as if searching for something lost. On peaceful evenings, he sat by the window and wrote a few lines in his journal. When you want to win, remember that true victory does not lie in wealth. It lies in daring to face yourself. Adrian did it. As for me, I am still learning how to do it. Time went on. People gradually forgot about the strange wager. But Jonathan did not. He lived the rest of his years under the shadow of a great lesson. As for Adrian Ward, no one knew where he went. Some said he had gone to a distant monastery. Others said he traveled the world with a free heart. But all were only rumors. The only certainty was this: he had given up 2 million rubles, given up the chance to change his life, just to prove that human beings do not need money to be truly rich. And so the story closed, but the lesson endured. Money can make a person arrogant and then bring them to ruin. Knowledge can bring power, but only a free spirit brings true wealth. When you find yourself trapped, remember this sometimes. Letting go of what seems most precious is the very path to liberation. Jonathan Hale lived on, carrying in his heart both shame and awakening. Adrian Ward disappeared, yet his presence remained as a reminder. When you seek the true meaning of life, listen to your own soul. Money, power, and knowledge all will fade. Only a free spirit endures.